All right, Joe, what makes that the standout for you?
I think for the song in general, it's just like it's very catchy. It like tells a story like very like clearly defined, and like this kind of walking this line of this kind of like two worlds. It's a fun change of pace in the album there, where it kind of picks back up. You just I feel like every time I hear it, I can't help but like stomp my foot, like tap my foot, to get a little like just get a little movement going.
Yeah.
The way the album goes, it kind of picks up right here. I think for me, a big part of it was I really recognize we're being pulled in a lot of different directions, and obviously him is he's very much on the road, this kind of road dog, and always moving to a new place and like finding a reason to like kind of settle down and like have something to like hold on to. It speaks so much to, I think, a lot of once you get kind of out of college and get into kind of like a real life, or if you like get out of high school and go to like a real life thing, it would just like time just flies by, and it feels like you can get really pulled in a bunch of different directions. And there's a lot of things where it's like, oh, my like friends have moved away, or like, oh, my friends went to college, or all my friends went to like a state school and I didn't, or all these other things where it's like maybe like family relationships start to change and look dramatically different than they did. And like so many things are pulling and vying for your attention and time. And there's I feel like a lot of people, especially young people, get strung out and are like looking for something to kind of like just kind of like tether them, like center them in their life. And I think that really spoke to me. And I think the song, I don't know, it's just like all of David Ramirez music makes me want to sit down and just like start cracking beers and like smoking cigarettes and just like having a great time, which is like
yes, good country music, I believe, should do that. And I think there's like, as much as it we question genre on this podcast, but there's a good country element to all of the outlaw. He's got that outlaw country tradition that he's infused into here in some amount, right? The Willie Nelson, the Dwight Yoakam, that's there for sure.
He's like, and I'm glad you mentioned it. He spends like a lot of time in Austin, I believe, and is very influenced by like the kind of like ACL and like South by Southwest, like this big like music city. And I think a lot of that is seen. That's where like a lot of that is derived from, is being so like person who lives in Austin and is a part of like that community, but not like, hey, I just moved here from California because Tesla brought me here and I'm gonna try and be cool or whatever. I feel like if you talk to anybody from Texas, like, oh yeah, my X, Y, and Z just moved to Austin, where it's like, oh, your friends, your family, and somebody else is like, oh yeah, everybody's moving there, and it's like, no, he's like been there and like making music, and
so he's a real one.
Yeah, absolutely.
He strikes me as being someone who, like, ACL or South by Southwest are coming along, and it would be like he'd be the one, and like the local guy, and like everyone would be there for his show because he's just sort of like a regular and kind of like a darling of that scene. Hold On sounds to me like if David Ramirez were played on mainstream radio, like this would be the track off the album. Even though like everyone all the like critics seemed to really love Rockin' a Hard Place from what I was reading about, but like Hold On, that's actually the song that spoke to me the most when I was listening to this.
Yeah, I feel like Rockin' a Hard Place gets a lot of love on this album, and so does Harder to Lie. I think Harder to Lie maybe is like one of the first ones when you look him up on Spotify. It's like one of his like most famous songs. Yeah, I mean everything in here I can point to be like, I register with this, and this. I mean obviously like the communion starts off and it kind of goes, and you have that kind of like religiousness and like just trying to figure out the truth, and you have a lot of things here kind of inspired. Like another thing I like didn't want to go out and say, but we'll do it. It's like having similar, like, I don't know, trying to be like cool and like trying to find love and like maybe pretending to be a ladies man. I don't know. I was like doing that a lot in college. And a lot of this was like Harder to Lie and a few other ones like Wild Bones. How do you get them back is all a lot about like, oh, I'm the baddie and I have like hurt somebody.
Right.
I don't know, I think I experienced that a lot where it's like, oh man, I'm going to screw this up and I'm the villain.
With respect to relationships specifically?
Specifically to relationships, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think a lot of dumb guys like me in high school and college and like that were, making just like super interesting life choices a lot.
Dumb in the sense that there's a lot of trial and error that's going on, and I think
for sure.
And I think that that conflict is really alive and well in every single song on this album. I think one of the things that I appreciated about this is how it infuses ideas of Christian spirituality into music that doesn't seem to be prescriptive in terms of an answer, right?
Yeah.
And how it, like, there's a gray area that it's able to live in. And I think what you're describing to me is really this, dealing with the feelings of guilt and shame about decisions you make, or even just deciding to change, like the willingness to change, and the kind of like the honesty about the need to do that. That's a theme I see throughout this whole thing. And knowing your story, I think it makes a lot of sense to me why that would be a connective theme for you.
Yeah, I think a lot of this album is David talking about, like, I know what's right. I've been told what's right. I've been told what's true. Yeah, like that kind of vein. And it's like, I am now living life, and what I think is right isn't matching. And how do I like reconcile these things?
Yeah.
And I think that's what kind of drew me to this album the most, was like, oh man, yeah, there's a lot of gray area in life where a lot of what you're told is like, it's black and white. You're this or that. You do this or that.
Right.
And it's just like you get in these situations where you're not like trying to be the bad guy. You don't like want to do the wrong thing, but things just kind of happen. The cards are dealt, and you like come up short, and that's just kind of life. And like thinking back on that is a lot of this album is trying to figure out what the gray area. I love the album art is like very this gray kind of smoky visual. Yeah.
Well, but the being able to live with it right now, kind of thing, I think is what I sense him trying to do, right? Because I think when you're raised in a I can't speak for all religious traditions, but certainly in the tradition that I was raised in, that there's this, that the answer comes after this life, right?
Sure.
Like that's one of the things. I'm not saying that's I mean to be reductive by saying that, but I also mean that that's a theme, right? As you say, okay, well, all of this stuff matters to a point, and then what happens after this life almost matters more, right? But
yeah,
I think what I appreciate about people who can speak about spirituality in this way are that, like, spirituality should be tools for the here and now, and for dealing with our fallibility. And I think a lot of great folk music really, really speaks to that conflict. And so those when those kind of little pinpoints in this album came out, it really struck me. I wanted to. So you have seen him live a few times, right? What's that like? What's the experience of seeing him live?
It is a show, man. He's a great performer. I feel like so there's been a few times where I don't remember the end of the show because it's just one of those kind of shows where it's just like you start kicking them back, and there's even like where was I? So I've seen him mostly in Chicago. I mean, we've seen him at Shuba's. He played at the City Winery, which was a really interesting choice. We saw him at this little bar out in like Oak Park and Martyrs. He opened for like kind of a country band at Dahlia Hall, which was interesting. And then actually I brought some friends down to Texas, and we showed him my hometown Houston, and then we drove to San Antonio because that's when he was playing, or where he was playing. So got a little road trip and saw him down at like the Rustic, or like a bigger kind of like outdoor theater. And he just puts on a great show. It's always like, I don't know, it's like the little things that like make a show feel great, where he like draws out like kind of the last note, or he's up there and it's like got the black cowboy boots that he's like, kind of doing the like almost like putting out a cigarette, that kind of like move there where you're just like kind of grinding the front of the boot there. Like it's just, oh man, just great shows. And it's always just like, I'm an artist, let me come up here, do my job. Like I'm gonna drink a beer, I have a shot or whatever, and just like it feels like he doesn't realize we're there until he looks up between songs.
Ooh, I like that. Yeah,
he's in his own world, living his best life, and then in between he'll like point or like talk over to the band or whatever, and come back and do the live show stuff where you ask somebody, or you kind of banter between, or like leading into the next, like kind of segue into the next song or whatever. But I think one of my favorite things about him is just how like he's going to be outside after the show smoking a cigarette outside the venue, and you can just go out and hang out and talk and like,
and you've done that? Like have you?
Oh yeah. I think like the most recent time when he was out in Oak Park, me and my wife both have like merch of his shirt, and so we like took a picture and posted it on Instagram, and we walked outside, and he's just like such a, he feels like he's like this older type of guy, and it's just like, oh, you two, you're the internet people. Or it's like, dog, it's Instagram. Like, you don't have to say the internet. Like,
yeah,
what?
That fits though. That fits my image of
old.
him, is that he probably wouldn't be too social media savvy.
Yeah, exactly. And so we just kind of talked and hung out, and so one of his albums kind of down the road is more like a love-based album, and it's actually they had some of our first like song, like our first dance to, and like walking down the aisle and stuff, just because like Hallelujah Love Is Real is like a super dope song. That album, that whole My Love Is a Hurricane is just killer album in general. But right after that one, he played at Thalia, and he was an opener, so he was just like hanging outside drinking, smoking, and it was just like, hey, we got to like talk to him about like what his music meant to us. Like our wedding had just passed of like a few months before, and so he was just like trying to be very polite but very clearly he's like, hey, I came out here to smoke a cigarette and really kind of do my thing.
This
like,
is my time.
Yeah, exactly.
Cigarette time. Thank you very much.
Exactly. So I was like, all right, cool. We just like got a quick picture and waved
Hilarious.
and kind of walked back in. But
I love when they work the merch table. That's one.
Yeah, exactly.
That's
the other thing.
That's so fun when you're like, I'm going to buy a shirt from them, and it's actually them. That's cute.
I think the other thing too is like a lot of his best music is on these little like singles, or like these little EPs and stuff like that. Like Strange Town is a great record and stuff like that. And so just like having like one of the first few like CDs I bought, and just having him like sign this little like wild that 4 songs went on one CD, but whatever. But like buying that, having him sign, and just like hang out and talk to us in San Antonio was a blast. And
he's accessible. We like that.
For one of the years I got my buddy who like introduced me to him, he was doing things where if you like DM'd him on Instagram and like paid him, he would like write the lyrics to one of his songs and then mail the lyric, like the handwritten lyrics to them. So sent that to one of my friends, and it's just like super, it's like very down to earth guy. It's like, I think he's just trying to live the dream. He's just a guy who loves performing, and he's just trying to do that and forever, I think.
Hell yeah. Well, okay. So remember, we can't forget that this is you had a task. You had a task that we set to you, and we asked you to nominate a perfect album. And I think I'm understanding why this album. Means so much to you personally. But when we asked you to nominate an album that it was quote unquote perfect, we didn't define that for you. So what standards were you using to assess albums for nomination?
For like me, in my mind, like the perfect album tells a story, and like has like a narrative kind of through line through it. Also, it's not only does it like have a story, but it's also like listenable. You know, I feel like there are lots of albums that are either like too long or maybe too short, or just like not digestible or not like coherent enough. Mm-hmm. I think like having an album that's like easily digestible, not in the fact that it's just like short or long or something like that, but like that coherently all the songs feel like they're there. It's not like, oh, well, I put out this single and so we slapped it right in the middle so that people would listen to at least half the album.
Yeah.
I think the kind of third thing is really music that speaks to like who the artist is and like the artist vibe. I feel like some of my favorite songs are from like other artists, or like features, or like these songs that really break out and are just like, oh, like somebody like I don't accuse anybody of ghostwriting, but like, oh, this is the collaboration, and this is like a lot of people working on this, and a lot of David is like from his heart and soul. I think this is why this is like one of my. It's tough. It was honestly really tough choosing between the albums, because like David so much to me is like, oh, I just listened to a block of David Ramirez. I just listened to like this artist in mass.
Right. You kind of go on a bender of David Ramirez, if you will.
Exactly. And so a lot of this, I think this album specifically really speaks to all of those things. I think it tells I think it has like a beautiful narrative to it, where it's talking about like him and his story and his life, and like this kind of gray area, this minutia, these like fables being ripped from kind of, I think, like Harder to Lie, where it's like just trying to figure out, like discern who he really is, and like who these stories kind of make him out to be. I think that kind of checks that box. I think every song, like every track on this album has a place and is like there super intentionally. I think starting off, it kind of like eases in with Communion and Harder to Lie, and then kind of speeds up with like Rockin' It Hard Place is a banger there. I think A New Way of Living, it's just like such a rocking song where it's just like you just want to rock and like belt it out whenever you hear it. Then to move into the more like the On Your Side kinds of Bring It Back, Melt It Out, and then Wild Bones is truly just like just such like a powerful song. It's just like a lot of, I can't sing very well. Like I don't have any like musical talent. I can't sing. I can't play instruments. I tried a little bit of like audio engineering in high school and stuff, but like Wild Bones is just like, oh, I have to like sing this as loud as I can anytime I hear it. And that's often like when I was like walking down the street, like walking home from work, like walking to the subway, or just sitting there and just like, oh no, I can't control myself. I just have to belt this out.
It's compulsion. I get it.
Yeah.
You have to do it.
I'm like forced to. And then it kind of ends up there with Hold On. And I think that is kind of that one last push of the album there, with such like really ties together the kind of like story and narrative there before moving into Ball and Chain, which is very much of like I'm getting off the stage song. Here's a song about me and my like relationship to music after just performing, and it's like such a like period like on the sentence of this album.
And it's such a classic musical image as well. The Ball and the Chain, right? It's true. We see that over and over again too. So he's got that sort of tradition thing that he's pulling from. Are there any skips on the album?
Not that I can think of.
Can a perfect album have skips?
I mean, I think that I don't think so. I think like that kind of talks to like the listenability and like digestibility. It's like, is it a perfect album if there's like, but
this is a point of contention. This is something we've talked to a lot of people. I mean, I would say it's about 50-50, right, Michael? That people say that there can be a clunker.
I think most people are on the no skips train, to be honest. I think like I mean, I don't necessarily feel that way, but I think that a lot of people do.
I'm also a person where it's like I need to listen to like an album all the way through.
Okay.
So that's probably why that's a big influence of like when I put on, I don't like cherry pick a song. I will hit that first, like just the album play. It's not like I play from a certain song or anything. It's just like boom.
And there, I will say, even in my new relationship with this album, I believe that this would lend itself best to that, to being played top to bottom. I'm not entirely sure why yet. And a lot of the reasons you're kind of expounding here are leading me to believe that it is the case. So I see what you mean there.
Well, before we move on to our deliberation here, I did want to share one thing I found in an interview with him. He actually was asked to talk about what his top 5 albums are. And I don't know if have you already seen this, Joe?
I don't know. Maybe not. I may have, but I don't. Go for it.
His top 5 albums he was asked to share are Tidal by Fiona Apple, The Eminem Show by Eminem, of course, August and Everything After by the Counting Crows, Heartbreaker by Ryan Adams, which to me, that was the big one. I was like, oh, yes, this sounds very much like that.
Yes.
And then rounding out his top 5 is To Pimp a Butterfly by Kendrick Lamar. So
that checks out.
That's a wild top 5.
I mean, like, it sort of speaks to the sort of, I don't know, like the sort of eccentricity, maybe like your own eccentricity of musical taste, Joe, but also like the fact that like he's kind of hard to pin down. Like, I mean, it's I guess it's Americana and I guess it's kind of folk, but like there's other influences there.
Yeah, you have things that are very almost like you have something that are very, and this is one of my friends always fight me. He's like, he's not country. He's like, he has country songs. Like if you listen to David Ramirez, there are songs that are straight up country songs.
Maybe that's the distinction, is that some songs are country.
Exactly. But then you have some songs that are like alternative, like soft rock. And then like as you almost like, there's things where it's just kind of, you have to throw it up to like an Americana or singer-songwriter because there's like, what else could it be? I memean, he's all over the place with like some more electronic stuff, and then he's got like that steel guitar every once in a while, and it's like, there's that Texas. That's like
his Houston is showing.
Yeah, exactly.
I also got a little bit of Dawes in there. You ever listen to Dawes?
Yeah,
Dawes is good, and there's definitely like a little bit of connective tissue here with them. I think. But I wouldn't call them country either.
No, yeah.
I would call them...
It's almost like, it's like, it's just truly like this, like, kind of, you don't want to say like indie, or like, but it's like this I guess Americana is the best, and I think the most commonly used, because it's like, well, I mean, we can't have a 13-word run-on for what genre this guy is.
Well, you know what? I think the scary thing is that what happens a lot of times when a artist or album enters that zone is that they give it the term adult contemporary, which I have no idea what that means.
I feel like because it's almost vaguely rock stuff, it would got just thrown into the alternative mix. Because now when I listen to alternative radio, it's like, what is going on here?
I'd rather call it alternative than adult contemporary, because that makes me think of like Barry Manilow or something like that.
That's fair. I have no idea.
It was a very like 80s and 90s sort of genre, and it sort of distinguished what got played on MTV versus what got played on VH1. Is basically what the like VH1 was adult contemporary, MTV was whatever was cool in the moment. So anyway.
Well, this is a slippery slope we could go down much further. But Michael, I think we might be getting to that point where we need to deliberate, right?
I think we are. Is it time for the deliberation phase?
I believe it is. Dun dun. It's kind of rad. I love it.
I love our new sound effect. Yes,
I do too. We're growing up, baby. Okay, so we're officially in the deliberation phase now. You want to go first? You kind of want to see what?
I'll go first. I mean, I think like for me, like what spoke to me was, I think the way you talked about how this is an album where the song, you can hear him searching like through the lyrics and through the music, and the fact that, I don't know, like I'm not a lyric guy. I tend to be music before lyrics. But when you find an album where the lyrics speak to you as you are in that present moment, and you feel like you're basically like experiencing the same things, I mean, there's just no experience that can match that. Like when someone is creating art that is you, it's like, anyone could tell you, oh, I don't like this album. You'd be like, shut up. Like this is exactly who I am and what I need right now. And like, I really appreciate that. That for me is, that's where this like really connected for me. What about you, Tyler?
Yeah, I'll second that for sure. There's the kind of points you made about it being very intentional, the intentionality of the placement of the songs, and I think this thing about being able to not listen to it scattershot, and really the primary way that you approach it being listening to it from top to bottom. That is not something we hear very often from people. Most people are like, well, I can listen to an album, this album that I consider perfect from top to bottom, and I do it every now and then. But very rarely do we hear from someone who says, I primarily listen to this album from top to bottom, which sort of lends itself to that point you're making about it being a complete thought, a complete musical thought in one thing. So that all makes a lot of sense to me. And then on a personal level, I think just the kind of mirroring that I see in your sort of spiritual experiences, your sort of experiences in finding meaning in the world, and your pathway. There's a lot of romance to it, and I think one of the things that I to get biased about it, something that I noticed about you early on in our time getting to know each other is that sort of emotional intelligence, that sort of emotional way in which you approach the world that I see mirrored in this music. So when I see an album match up with the person that I know very well, that lends itself to its case, because listen, it's our podcast and we make the rules. Okay. So all in all, I think it's looking like a pretty good case, right, Michael? Should I put it to you this time? You put it to me last time.
Yeah, put it to me.
Okay, Michael, tell me. You heard the case that Joe made. We've deliberated. Has he done enough? Is David Ramirez's Fables a perfect album? Does it go to 11?
It most certainly does. Congratulations, Joe.
Whoa, okay. I was like, they're going to say no, and I'm going to track him down and fight him. Just like how life is going to be. But no, yeah.
You're like, I'm going to ruin a relationship over this? I'm ready to do it?
I got plane tickets booked. I don't know exact addresses, but I'm going to get to cities or regions and just find
That's what David would do. He would write a song about tracking someone down, not having a specific address, but doing what it takes, John Wick style, to do it.
Yeah. Just jumping in my Kia Soul standard. I got my manual Kia Soul, and I'm on my way. I'm gonna come get you.
I think he had a Kia Rio, to be specific.
Yeah.
God knows a Kia Rio probably doesn't even exist anymore.
Probably not.
That's real outlaw shit when you have like a car that doesn't exist anymore, right? Love that.
Absolutely. We say niche, but now that I think about it, there is a very like, I think in like 2020, I saw a Subaru commercial where his song "Time" was featured in the background. So like, watch out.
Get your money, man. Get your money.
I had to dig deep to find like one other dude on Twitter who was like, "Did anybody else just see this commercial during the Super Bowl?" And I was like, "Yeah."
You know, at this point, I'm like, I don't judge anybody for putting their song in a commercial. When The Smile had a song during like NFL Thursday night, I was like, all right, it's over. Everyone can sell out now. Doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Get your money. Joe, we're so honored to have had you. I'm so honored to be your friend. And I'm really glad that we're going to be living closer to each other pretty soon when I make my way back to the Midwest. This is your moment. If you want to share if you want to plug anything that you're working on, or just anything that you're geeking out on that you want people to check out, this is your moment to share that with our listeners. What did you have in mind?
So I have some things in the works, mostly some like nerdy podcast stuff. Hopefully like helping people to like learn how to like run Dungeons and Dragons, like GM games and stuff like that. So I'll nothing like concrete yet, but it'll be in the works. And then the other thing is, if you're in Chicago and you like want to play like Dungeons and Dragons or other like tabletop RPGs, follow Wizard Staffing Co. on Instagram. We host different events at different bars and like venues in the city where you sign up online, pay like $10 or whatever, come in, just have like a very professional experience of like a bunch of other cool people who want to roll dice and play pretend, and come through. I will run games there. It's not only Dungeons and Dragons, so if you're like looking for some indie games and stuff like that, we also run those. So
we'll make sure to put all that in our bio too.
Well, dear listeners, we hope you've enjoyed this episode. And I mean, now you should do your part and go listen to David Ramirez's Fables.
Yeah.
And, follow us on the social medias, whichever ones out there still exist. The
internet.
You can find links to those in the bio. Dear listeners, we're recording this in December, just so you know. So we don't know we don't know what's going to happen soon.
God knows.
But yeah, thanks so much for listening. And we'll see you next week.
We love ya.
Bye.
I was here too.